What do we refuse to see about ourselves? And why does it shake us when we go unrecognized? You're listening to Torah in 7, a Parsha podcast by Lubavitch International, where we unpack some of the narrative and some of the nuance in the weekly Torah reading in 7 minutes. I'm your host, Baila Olidort, and before we begin, I want to thank all the listeners who reached out to me with comments. Your feedback is so welcome. Please continue sharing with me. Parshat VaYeshev opens a story of family, rivalry, rupture, and betrayal. Favoritism sparks jealousy, secret plots unfold, and the bonds of brotherhood are tested like never before, drawing us into one of the most tense and dramatic narratives in the Torah. Let's begin. The Parsha opens by telling us that Yaakov favors Yosef. He makes him a special coat, provoking his brother's jealousy. Yosef has dreams of rising above his family, which he shares with his brothers, deepening their resentment. When the brothers are out with their flocks, Yaakov sends him to check on them. The brothers see him coming and scheme to get rid of him. They remove the coat Yaakov made him and throw him into a pit. He's then sold to passing traders who take him to Egypt. Before returning to their father, the brothers dip Yosef's coat in a goat's blood and present it to Yaakov, leading him to conclude that Yosef was torn apart by a wild beast. Meanwhile, Yehuda's eldest son marries Tamar, but dies soon after. Tamar then marries Yehuda's second son, who also dies. Because she had no children from either husband, by custom of levirate marriage, she should have married Yehuda's youngest son. But Yehuda delays, secretly hoping to prevent this marriage, trapping Tamar in permanent widowhood. When Tamar realizes that Yehuda has no intention of letting his son marry her, she disguises herself as a harlot. She veils her face and waits at the crossroads where she knows Yehuda will pass on his way to sheep shearing. Yehuda doesn't recognize her, and he propositions her. But first, Tamar secures his seal, cord, and staff as collateral. The tension in these stories turn on one word, haker, recognize. When the brothers bring Yosef's coat to Yaakov, they say, hakerna, recognize this. They aren't asking him to identify the coat. He knows it. He made it. They're triggering his recognition of what it represents. Favoritism, blind spots, a rupture in the family. In the story of Yehuda and Tamar, when Yehuda, still in the dark about his role here, learns that Tamar is pregnant, he orders her punished. In her defense, she sends the 3 items back and says, "It is by the man to whom these belong that I am pregnant." In a moment of moral symmetry, she uses the same words Yehuda used earlier when he and his brothers brought Yosef's bloodied coat back to their father. She says, hakerna, recognize this. Tamar is not asking him to confirm if those items are his. Of course they are. They bear his insignia. The seal, cord, and staff symbolize his identity, his family, and his leadership. Tamar is forcing him to recognize his failure in all 3. Haker, to recognize, is not to see something new. It's to look more closely at something that's been there all along, ignored or denied. And in both narratives, the truth has been denied with devastating consequences. In the Yosef story, Yaakov seems oblivious to the hatred his favoritism sowed, and possibly to the brothers feeling unseen by their father. But finally, says the Torah Vayakira, Yaakov recognized the coat, or perhaps everything it pointed to, and his world collapses. In the Yehuda story too, the Torah says Vayaker Yehuda. Yehuda recognizes his moral failure, and he is unable to hide from himself. We see that self-recognition can be destabilizing. It breaks Yehuda open, but it is the first step toward repair. Only when Yehuda faces his blind spots does he finally see Tamar, her courage and her virtue, and he declares, "She is more righteous than I." This dynamic continues next week with Yosef and his brothers. Years earlier, they did not recognize Yosef's humanity when they threw him into the pit. Now, when they come before him in Egypt, the Torah says, "Vayitnaker." Yosef makes himself a stranger to them. The word echoes vayaker, recognition, its meaning reversed, hinting at the connection between recognition and estrangement. Only when Yosef overhears his brothers admit their guilt, confessing that they ignored his cries, his humanity, is he convinced that they are finally capable of recognizing him. Only then does he identify himself to them. When we avoid recognizing the truth about ourselves, we often fail to recognize the humanity of others. And to go unrecognized by those who should know us best can be emotionally annihilating. Kafka's Metamorphosis captures this. Gregor Samsa awakens physically transformed, but he retains his human consciousness, and he's horrified that his family no longer recognizes him. To be unseen by those who should know you is to feel yourself fade from existence. Recognition brings the estranged back to familiarity. It is sensory, emotional, embodied. Often it begins with a stimulus, a cue that awakens buried knowledge. This reminds me of the well-known story about the rabbi who searched Christian orphanages for hidden Jewish children after the Holocaust. Many children no longer remembered who they were, and the priests denied their presence. Their lives had been ruptured by separation from their families and the erasure of their identities. So when the children were in bed, the rabbi walked through the orphanage and said, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. The sound of the Shema awakened something inside them. They began to cry, to call for their mothers. For the first time in a long time, they recognized themselves. Their truth, long hidden and suppressed, was stirred awake, giving them a sense of restored presence in the world. The Lubavitcher Rebbe showed us what it looks like when someone awakens recognition in others. With a few words, or even a single glance, he could stir a soul from slumber. He didn't give people their identity. He kindled the spark through which they recognized themselves. That kind of recognition can be unsettling, but it is always life-giving. So, to recognize oneself is the courage to live without illusion or denial. To recognize another is to hold space for them. And with deep recognition, we repair ruptures within ourselves, our families, and our society. That's my takeaway from Parshat VaYeshev. And if you enjoyed it, please leave a comment, share, and subscribe wherever you listen. You can also message me directly at editor@lubavitch.com. Shabbat Shalom.